back to our mayoral candidates. Again, each mayoral candidate has 4 minutes to answer their question, and the other candidate has 2 minutes to respond.
Chris Perret, would you please come to the lectern?
Okay.
You have 4 minutes to respond to answer this question. How would you define the relationship between the Nederland Downtown Development Authority and the Board of Trustees?
I feel that with the Downtown Development Authority and with the Board of Trustees, they need to work together. They need to be able to have meetings together and discuss their plans so that both the board knows what the Downtown Development Authority wants to do and that the Downtown Development Authority knows how the board is feeling. We as board members were elected by the town. The Downtown Development Authority, they have their own, it's all based on the businesses in town, of how they get their votes and everything like that. If we have work out like we do with the other committees in town, the Planning Commission and zoning and things like that, where you have meetings and inputs put in to the board from those advisory boards. Not saying that the Downtown Development Board needs to be an advisory board, but they're more than that. They have their own funding. They have their own funding circles. But we need to make it that when they have a project, they come, get total buy-in from the town, as well as total buy-in from the Board of Trustees as well. And us as a board have to be able to listen to what their needs are as well, and understand that way they're not feeling like, oh, we're pushing this project down your throat, or you guys are controlling too much of our project, and go back and forth that way. We really don't need that. We need to have more camaraderie, and we also need to be able to have that businesses that are support the Downtown Development Authority also have a say in what the Board of Trustees does with the downtown area or with things like that. Thank you.
Mr. Larson, would you wish to respond? The trustee candidates aren't really responding to each other. I thought I would. No, I totally agree with Chris. I mean, I think the DDA is one of the most effective and collaborative arms of our government. I mean, they are one of the few groups in town that actually has the potential for money and a great source for the town to partner with on grant projects to get some real progress in the downtown area, things we can really get done. I remember in 2008 when I was on the board for the Board of Trustees for the first time, I was the trustee liaison to the DDA. And that was really my first introduction to local businesses. I had run a business back in college. I had an internet bicycle business that failed miserably, but it was bad. Trying to sell bikes on the internet in 1995 was a little bit of a bad idea. But working with the local businesses in 2008, I really got to understand how the Board of Trustees and the DDA can work together to build projects that support the entire town and really can improve the downtown area. And so I think that as we move forward, we have so many big infrastructure projects coming before the town, so many problems with the roads, the drainage, I think have been mentioned at least a half dozen times tonight. This is a place where the DDA and the town working together can leverage one another to really get a lot more done than either can do alone. And continuing to work together is critical for the next few years.
Thank you. Go ahead and stay up there because your question is next. How can Board of Trustees meetings be more accessible and inviting to the public?
I think this is a couple things here. And first of all, I think we've done a very good job of making them accessible. We always have, early on in the meeting, a chance for anyone in the community, not just in Nederland, in the surrounding community, to come before us and talk about anything they want. It's a chance to bring up new issues for 3 minutes or more if they can get some friends to give them time. I think that is a great thing and has worked really well in the past, but I think there's a lot more we can do, and there's really, I see 3 parts of this. First is the dissemination of information from the Board of Trustees and from the local government to the residents of Nederland. This can be everything from what we're seeing tonight. I mean, we're having a great example. We're finally having we're having volunteers have come forward to help stream this to people who didn't want to come out in the snow. This should become something we just do for the board meetings. There should be an audio stream online for every board meeting, so you don't have to come and sit and listen to us talk to each other for 3 hours on a Tuesday night. You can listen in at home. Secondly, Right now, our town clerk and timekeeper for the night, LJ, does a magnificent job of keeping the minutes at every one of our meetings. She does a great job. We're posting those online. People can get to them. But there's more we can do. Wouldn't it be great if there was a table on the website where every few weeks would update, here's the votes, here's the ordinance resolutions they vote on, here's how each individual voted. Here's, go look at it. You don't have to dig through minutes to find out that the bag ordinance passed 4-3 and see who voted for and against. Boom, there it is. Better dissemination of ordinances. Let's have a database where you can look up all of them. Very clear, very easy. The recordings of the meetings. That's the sort of one directional from us to the residents that we can really make an improvement on. The second part is the coming back to us. Commentary from the residents to the town. And one of the big ways to do this is we got to be more flexible in our town meetings. How many times have we come to a board meeting, had an issue, we see people waiting in the audience, and they're still sitting there at 9:30 at night, 2.5 hours in the meeting when we finally get to their matter. Let's be more flexible with our meetings. Let's be able to adjust on the fly. So if we see we've got a big group of people there to speak on a particular issue, we push that to the front. If we're streaming the meetings, that gets a little easier because people then have looked at the agenda, they hear we're moving it, they're like, oh, I want to talk, they can come over. So a little more flexibility so that we're hearing more what you guys want to say and what you have to say to us in a timely manner before 10 p.m. when we're all exhausted. The third and final piece is the conversations, the back and forth. This is the part that's kind of new, and I think we can do a lot more because social media has caught up with us. Let's start building I've been researching this over the last few months, and from what I've understood and what I see at higher level politics, the best platform for this is something like Twitter. Let's build a Twitter community in the Netherlands so we can have ongoing conversations via that. And people can comment everything from you're driving down Big Springs Drive and you see a big pothole, you have a hashtag, you send a picture, it's seen by us, it's seen by the Board of Trustees, it's seen by Public Works, we see that right away. We have this back and forth, we can do instance reporting like that, plus the larger policy type things where we're talking about stuff that we're gonna take the next 6 months to a year to decide on and have a continual back and forth. So those are kind of the three pieces and the three ways I see of increasing the communication and the conversation between the town government and the town residents. Thank you.
Mr. Braden, do you wish to respond? You have 2 minutes.
It'll be a lot shorter. I think that the board, due to the fact that you are elected by the people, you should be able to be there at their, if they see you in the grocery store, they can say, hey, this is what I think is going on. If you're coming to a meeting, there should be the 3 minutes that you're allowed in the public comment part. All that should be at the beginning of the meeting. The beginning of the meeting is where you should be able to talk to all the people, have people come up and talk to you about the issues that are on that agenda. And then another way of doing that would be doing all of the homework or things like that, where you're putting all of the, like, paying all the bills and all that stuff. You can put that at the end of the meeting, and then have your public in the beginning. So then then 8 o'clock they could be out of there versus 10 o'clock they could be out of there. I think we have to realize that when we are all volunteers for these positions, even though there's a little stipend and things like that for us. But we have to listen to the ones that elected us, and we have to listen to the families and things like that who have to go home to their kids. So we don't want to keep mom and dad out at a meeting until 10 o'clock at night and then letting them go home. We want to get them in and out earlier than that. Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to the last trustee question. Trustees have 4 minutes to answer the question, and then there's a 2-minute response window.
Topher, your question is, in the tension between maintaining the beloved Nederland culture, inevitable growth and progress, what about Nederland needs to change, and what needs to stay the same?
I'll just answer it in order. I'd say what needs to change, probably the biggest issue keeps coming up tonight is, well, for one, we need to stop hemorrhaging families and kids. I spoke with the 2 principals about a week ago and found out that we're losing about a classroom worth of kids every 3 years. So the trend is not good. We're at a boom time in Colorado, so we should not be seeing this right now. We should be going the other direction, but for some reason we're having an issue losing families. Part of that, I think that has multiple issues around it. Part of it is obviously places to live. The housing is an issue. But we need to use these upgrades that we talked about, and it kind of relates to my first question about Nederland seeming somewhat tired and run down. It needs to be appealing to families that come into the Front Range and want to live here. And so as we fix things, we want to make it appealing to families and not just preserve, you know, the things that don't look good, like power lines and all across and you know, beat up streets and no sidewalks and ways to walk to school. You know, the safe walking routes to school is one that needs to change. You know, my wife and I, we walked our kids home from kindergarten every day through their kindergarten year, and I think if both of us had not been previously professional outdoor athletes, we probably would have died. Like, I mean, it was amazing. I don't think my adrenaline's ever pumped so much as trying to get across the highway right here between this community center and the elementary school. And I think the one thing that needs to change is we need to realize that we're a 1,400 person town supporting an immediate community of 5,000 next to a metropolitan area of several million. So people are going to come here whether we want them to or not. You know, we need to develop systems that can handle not only our current population, but increasing population. I mean, I've talked to a few people around here, and I understand, I can relate. They don't want any more people to come here. They'd rather we just cut it off and say, that's it, that's enough people in Nederland. But people are going to come here anyway. And even if we say, this is it, nobody else can move to Nederland, we're still going to have people coming into town. So we have to deal with population growth. We don't get to choose. I think some of the things that could help us would be the changing in building codes to allow for different models of homes. This model of a single home on a property with one family in it, we can make it as big as we want. I can have a 50,000 square foot home as long as my property was big enough, but I can only have one family in it. I think that needs to change. I would say the things that can remain the same and we should fight to keep them the same is trying the things we talked about and getting feedback from the town on all the projects we do and code changes and planning. I think the sustainability goals that we've made in the last 7 or 8 years have been great. I think we should continue to work towards those. I think that what we found out after the flood is that Nederland is a leader and it is a great resource for the peak-to-peak highway and the whole region around here. I think to continue to develop that position and offering things to not just Nederland but the community, the greater community, is something we should continue to do. From one of my favorite things about town, I think we should keep the same as kind of the relaxed atmosphere where people can be who they want to be and do what they want to do, and where we're not too worried about keeping our yards exactly the way that they look in Littleton and everywhere else in the world. I think the community eco-pass is something we should try to preserve as long as we can. It's one of the best things we have going. It can allow a lot of different people to do a lot of different things and enjoy the greater community here and cut down on our car use. And finally, I think the fabric of our town culture that is great. I think we should make sure we always try to preserve that, the music, the events, the arts, the outdoor recreation, and kind of that reluctance that a lot of us have to kind of keep up with the Joneses in terms of technology and growth. We don't want to grow for the sake of growth. We don't want to adopt technology for the sake of technology. We want it to have a purpose. And I think continuing to have conversations and I really like the group that's up here and to be able to continue to have a conversation with the community about all the different issues when they come up. And I think that, you know, the people who, you know, say they know the answer to these questions, there's no answers. We got to find them as we go.
Thank you. Do I have a response? Julie?
First, Topher, thank you. That was a really thoughtful, in-depth answer to the question. I just want to take one piece of it a little bit further, and that is something I think does need to change in town, and I hope that it's beginning to change now. And that is providing a safe and inclusive atmosphere to listen to people who have opinions different from our own. I heard way too many times from way too many people as a response when they found out I was running for the Board of Trustees, "Oh, you're brave." And of course that made me just a little bit concerned and nervous. But I think it was in response to that we do have this great, passionate, engaged community. And what we need to do is take it a step further and also make it a tolerant community so that we make room for everybody's ideas and we don't stop discourse, but we actually have the challenging discourse so that we can come to the best solutions that are representative of the entire community. And so I would just say maybe a personal challenge for all of us in the room, while you're talking to people face to face, when you're online, you know, keep it clean, keep it open, keep it supportive. And I think we can help address maybe some of the volunteer shortages we have, and reaching new people and engaging new people from within our own small community to make a bigger change. And so that's one thing I'd like to see improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Dallas? How would you, as a member of the Board of Trustees, like to see the town address the current camper transient homelessness issues that take place on Forest Service land around Nederland?
First thing I want to say is I'm actually super impressed with every answer I've heard here tonight. This is really a great group of trustees that are around tonight, and Mayor Luckett. It's been a long time since I've heard such thoughtful answers. So this question was an interesting one to me because I really haven't given it that much thought. I use the forest just like you do, and I've heard a lot of rumblings about people talking about transients and people coming to town and leaving their trash in the national forest. And you know, I go out and hike around and I do see things too. The shooting issue is one that I don't like because I've seen people leave their spent casings everywhere. And I'm not against shooting. I'm actually a hunter. I go out and I hunt, but I can't stand the shooting problem around the national forest. One of the things I suggested to the National Forest Officer when they came here for a meeting was why it's legal for someone to blast lead into the ground, but if I go and dump lead on the ground, I'm littering. What's the difference? There's none. And that's actually one of the things that we should be, you know, advocating in front of the Forest Service is things like that. You know, think outside of the box. Shooting, you know, putting lead on the ground is kind of a strange thing. So the transient issue, it's a hard problem. People like to come here and recreate. That we're surrounded by national forests, which has open camping on it, which we don't control, the National Forest does, and we don't have the right to tell people that they can't come here and camp. But we do have a problem of people coming here and camping and leaving trash and supposedly needles. I've asked my kids if they've seen anything like that, and they have not. I have not personally seen it, but I have heard stories. And there are a lot of people that are actively involved with this. There's a Facebook group that has formed, and it has now over 100 people that are talking about how to solve this issue. And I was impressed when I went to look at this Facebook group that was started by Joe Hall, that the conversation is about how to solve the problem and not necessarily how to confront the people. Because I don't think that we have the ability to confront the people that come and camp up here. They could be family, just normal families, or they could be people who are down on their luck and they're homeless and they needed a place to camp. But we don't have the ability to come in and make those kind of decisions about whether someone should be in the national forest or not. But what we can do is we can be vigilant about making sure that the laws that are currently in the books can be enforced, that we communicate to the law enforcement agencies, the sheriff, our own police department, the national forest officers, that there are problems that are happening in the national forest. And that Facebook group actually has done something interesting. They put up a map, and they've mapped out illegal campsites or places that are problems. And I think starting to think outside the box like that is where we may lead with this. I don't think that we should have any kind of an ill or negative view of people who come and camp in our national forest. They're just like us. They like to be in here. And I think that the program that was started by Hanson, the socks and sandwiches, I did a little research on that. I'm usually gone as part of the summer, so I'm not around sometimes to see it in work. But I think it's one of those things that actually helps to educate those people and tells them that they're welcome in our community, and that we have expectations that we love our forests just as much as they do, and we like to see them clean. But if we try to push them away, it probably will have the negative effect. And some of the communities down below we have to actually work with them. Right now, Denver is pushing people out of their camps. Boulder has rules that are going on the books, and it's actually going to exacerbate the problem for us. So we need to communicate with those people, the other communities, that says, hey, look, we're dealing with the aftermath of what you're doing. So let's all communicate. Let's try to figure this out. But I think really mostly it's let's be vigilant and let's try to enforce the current laws, but let's not get confrontational. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have a response? Okay.
Julie, your question is, how can the BOT and Town Hall cooperate for the best outcomes for the town?
Board of Trustees and Town Hall must cooperate to see to the best interests of the town. I think it's important for the current Board of Trustees and those who are vying for position on the board to all recognize that we have to earn and keep the public trust. I think sometimes we take this for granted when we're running, but in light of news that broke over the weekend, I feel like as a town we're vulnerable. What we all learned is deeply concerning, and it's affecting the entire town, and some more than others, particularly the families involved. And so that does weigh heavily on my mind. I do recognize that as a small town that relies on a small group of volunteers regularly, there will always be conflicts of interest. And I think for the town hall and town staff to work together to cooperate to see to a successful implementation of Vision 2020, we have to recognize that when there is a conflict of interest, or could be a perceived conflict, we need to be incredibly honest and transparent in the work that we're doing to make sure that people understand and that we're operating with the lines we need to operate within. I think one of the skills I bring as a candidate is my ability to partner and collaborate. And I developed those skills while working for National Wildlife Federation, and I had the opportunity to connect with government leaders. I worked closely with the Lieutenant Governor's Office, the Forest Service, the US EPA, representatives from local businesses and churches, sportsmen and naturalists, and brought them all together to work towards a common goal. And I think it's this type of partnership and relationship building that is needed on the board and with the town staff to improve relationships to make sure that we can cooperate and work towards our common goals. Some very tangible things that I think we can do as a board is, one, make sure that our expectations are really clear and understood. I worked once in a situation where I had 3 really smart, savvy bosses, but they didn't all always agree on what I should be doing, and they didn't take time to discuss it. And so I think making sure that everybody is on the same page as far as what work lays ahead, what the expected outcomes are, and when it will be done is really important. To support that, I think we need a second thing, and that is an identified intentional stream of communication between the board and staff that is maintained. And so it's not something that we're only looking at every other Tuesday to catch up, but that we are continuing our communication and making sure we're improving those lines of communication. I think this will also help with job satisfaction. I think when you know what the expectations are, you're able to fulfill them, and then you feel good about your work and accomplished, and that feeds a success loop. And so I'd like to see that happen. The third thing I think that could benefit both parties is getting information like the agenda and the materials you need to review to be prepared for a board meeting in advance of the meeting. And that means more than 2 or 3 days in advance, but perhaps a week in advance, so that the expectation is every board member comes prepared, knowing what they need to know to make the decisions that they need to make at the board meeting, and the staff doesn't have to take time revisiting those materials. So those are the concrete steps I would take. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a response. Dallas?
I wanted to talk after, I think it was Chris was talking about how the town communication and meetings run, but it segues into what you had just said. I think one of the biggest problems, or one of the things that creates problems in communities like ours, is lack of communication. And you can point to almost every one of the problems we have, and it comes from lack of communication. And I saw it when I was on the Board of Trustees previously. And when I was on the Board of Trustees, I tried to make sure that we were transparent and we communicated well. One of the things I did was I suggested that we have a better website. And I built that website when I was on the Board of Trustees as a volunteer. And there was issues with staff using that website, but what that website tried to do was it tried to communicate with the public a lot more. We had online forums, we had all of the things posted of the ordinances and resolutions. They were all searchable. This was back in 2008. I remember 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Kevin Mueller at a Board of Trustees meeting said, why aren't the ordinances online in a searchable fashion? They were in 2008 when we had that website. And it's communication, it's being able to find the information. One thing that I would like us to do as Board of Trustees is to not just have packets available a few days before, is to actually be very progressive. I'd like us to have online meetings, a hybrid online meeting format. And I've done a lot of research on this for a few years, where we would start our meetings like 2 or 3 days before Tuesday. And it allows the trustees to actually discuss things in an open format. You get to see what we are talking about. You actually get to communicate as well in that forum if you would like. And that goes with the sunshine laws. It allows us to speak prior to seeing each other at a meeting. Do you think it's reasonable for to have 3 hours to discuss an important topic among trustees? Because we don't get to talk to each other before that time. But if we go to an online meeting format where we get to discuss things out in the open, I think a lot of people will see the process and be able to actually participate. And so I'd like for us to do that if
Thank you.
we move that direction. Thanks. Gee.
How would you describe the relationship between local policing and the community? As a member of the BOT, how would you work with the current police force?
Those issues close to me because my father's career choice was law enforcement. And I've lived in this town for 35 years. I'll say that again. I remember when we had a town marshal. Imagine doing your job by yourself. It's changed a lot over the years. I understand the police department takes about a little more than $500,000 now to operate. It's a significant chunk of our tax money, but we need it, you know. And I think the biggest issue that with the pendulum going back and forth with good law enforcement and that is communication. Really, we and the Board of Trustees really have to communicate our desires and achieve those goals of a police department that we can be proud of. And I think our chief understands that. And as a citizen of the community, I'm very happy with the job he's been doing. So I'll keep it again brief. That's my thought on this process. And I'll also mention, we also talked about affordable housing. It's a shame a lot of our professionals have to travel great distances to serve our community. And it does defer a lot of very qualified people from applying for jobs here. And we really have to work on that because that would help them out, help our teachers out, and other professionals that serve our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a response? Okay.
Stephanie. With fire and flood dangers around us, does Nederland have an adequate emergency preparedness plan?
This question seems so simple, but I will tell you that I spent a fair bit of time researching my answer so that I could come up with a good answer. And fortunately, I learned a few things along the way. So many thanks to those who took time to talk with me from town staff, our fire chief, my husband, others, so I could get an education as to what we have in terms of emergency preparedness. So my quick response to this is yes, but since we can never be too prepared, I do think there are opportunities and some critical things that we do need to look at in terms of making improvements. So first of all, let's talk about what we do have in place. Every town program within Nederland has an established safety plan. They do drills, and unfortunately, we have actual experience, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, of responding to these emergencies. And the 2013 flood was a pretty recent example of that. So to respond to these threats, really things that I took for granted during the floods, we continued to have water at our house, clean water that was safe to drink. Our wastewater treatment plant kept running, which was amazing since pretty much all of the ones around us failed. We continued to have police and fire and ambulance services, and they had plans in place for how to address emergency situations. And our community center, our schools have a plan. Our library, I believe, has a plan, and our community center not only has a plan, but actually serves as an emergency shelter, not only for our community, but can serve our Intermountain area. Really, there's a huge amount of collaboration that went into place in response to those 2013 floods. And we have relationships with Boulder County Office of Emergency Management, our other peak-to-peak communities. We have access to resources with Red Cross. We have communications and protocols and plans. Say we were to lose the bridge in town and town was actually severed. The fire department's on one side, the police department's on the other. We have relationships with our neighbors in terms of how we might deal with those issues. So I think the success was really evidenced by kind of the lack of events or the quietness that we experienced after the floods. There were, I think, I didn't realize what a great job our wastewater treatment plant did after being there for only 6 months and still not really having the normal amount of time that you would have to regulate it. Our elementary school actually has students who were over in Estes who did not have clean water to drink until they could safely get out of Netherlands and be transported back home. So I think that's really a testament to what we do have in place. The floods did show us some areas though where we do have weaknesses, and work has been done to get a generator here that would help with future flooding. We've got a pump in place. There's a generator going in at the police station. We have generators at some of our other critical facilities. In September 2014, the trustees established an Emergency Preparedness Action Committee. It's a group of volunteers in our town who have come together and put together an amateur radio network. That's important in the time of in the time of issues, in the time of emergencies. And they're also looking at emergency preparedness among our neighbors. So what do we need to do? Access out of Big Springs is a big issue and something that we have been focused on in the town for about 15 years. The Board of Trustees and town staff have been working to get a relationship to make that happen, and I think some positive progress is being made there, and that's a really critical thing for our town and our residents of Big Springs. We need to keep our plans up to date, contact information, and just making sure that when we have a new Board of Trustees, a new mayor, that everybody knows what their responsibilities are as people change. And we need to work with our the emergency group that we set up in town to determine if there's more that we can do in our neighborhoods and have kind of neighborhood groups that communicate.
Thank you. We are done. I want to say thank you very much to Clerk and Recorder Laura Jane Bauer for her wonderful timekeeping. I want to say thank you to Kobe Mize for recording it, video-wise, for video recording. I want to say thank you to David Hardy for streaming this tonight. I want to say thank you to Hanson for co-moderating. Appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to the candidates. I think we've got an amazing slate of candidates this year. I'm going to have a hard time making my Thank you for coming, and be sure to vote. Take care. Good night.